Sexual intimacy is something that is intended for marriage, but every other form of intimacy is accessible to all of us. And so we need to make sure that we are looking at all facets of intimacy, all things that connect us together the way God meant for us to do.
Are you ready to create a strong, healthy marriage through encountering the living God? Hi, I'm April, spiritual director and marriage coach.
And I'm Aaron, pastor and marriage coach. Even though marriage is God's idea, He didn't say it would be easy. The unique stories and expectations we bring into our new marriages can make them feel more like a minefield.
Thankfully, God's desire is for marriages to be fully alive and healthy in Him. If this is what you're looking for, you've come to the right place. We want to help you hear from God and find the strong, living marriage He has for you.
Well, on this edition of the Living Marriages podcast, I was going to say we get spicy, but maybe we don't. But we are talking about intimacy today. But before we get into it, I just want to encourage you, if you're a regular listener, if you enjoy what you're hearing, please help us by hitting the subscribe button or the follow button and leave us a review. You can leave reviews now on Spotify on specific episodes and on Apple Podcasts as well, or wherever you hear us. We're just grateful to have you along for the journey. But as I mentioned, we are going to talk about intimacy today and why intimacy goes so far beyond the bedroom. We often hear that intimacy is a critical ingredient to having a healthy, connected marriage. But what is it, and why is it important for our marriages? As I mentioned, we often think that intimacy is tied to the bedroom and to sex in particular. But there's a big problem with that. If that's all that intimacy is, then we're missing out on the fullness and the richness of what the gift of intimacy is that God has given us.
If you think about it, looking back on creation and when God made man and woman, He made us for intimacy with Him initially. And so if we look at intimacy as solely being sexual intimacy, there's so much we miss out on.
Yeah.
And each one of us is created for intimacy with God and intimacy with one another. And sexual intimacy is something that is intended for marriage, but every other form of intimacy is accessible to all of us. And so we need to make sure that we are looking at all facets of intimacy, all things that connect us together the way God meant for us to do.
Beautifully said. And it's hard, isn't it, April? Because culture is telling us all the time that intimacy is about the bedroom. You know what? Even in the church, I think we hear that. And in the language that we use around intimacy, we always equate it to somehow what happens behind the closed door. And if you see a sock on mommy and daddy's doorknob, don't disturb, because they're being intimate. But it's interesting too. I've been seeing a lot of ads for Christian men on my social media feed. And there's one that I just had to quote because it just took my mind for a spin. It says this, quote, "I've helped hundreds of Christian men go from no intimacy to intimacy on demand, and their wives love it." Now, I don't know what my social media algorithm is picking up on. Maybe it's because we're in a marriage ministry now, and I post about marriage a bunch, but how does that ad make you feel when you hear it?
Ooh, I'm not a vending machine. It's just, it feels like, oh, well, just plug in the right amount of money, the right coins, the right whatever, and you'll get what you want. And it's just, that is so not what it's about.
It's not what intimacy is about at all. If that's not what it's about, then what is intimacy about? And I'm going to get slightly technical for a little bit here. I was doing a little bit of research on the work of psychoanalyst Eric Erickson, who says that intimacy is not the quality of romantic relationship, but it's to be seen as the potential within someone for connectedness. I'll say that again. It's about someone's potential for connectedness. And he goes on to point out that that potential hinges around three things. And these are three really key and crucial things that we'll be exploring in episodes to come here on the Living Marriages podcast. The first thing is this: intimacy hinges around our ability and our willingness to make a commitment to another person. Secondly, it hinges around our ability to share at a deep personal level, that is, to be vulnerable with someone else. And finally, intimacy hinges on our capacity to communicate inner thoughts and feelings. Now, those who are willing and able to thrive in those areas will have the potential for intimacy and connectedness in relationship. And those who aren't willing or able to commit or to sharing deep feelings and to communicating with each other will more often than not experience isolation. That makes sense if you actually pause to think about that for a moment. Now, as I mentioned, we will look at each of those three things in the coming weeks of the podcast. But I wanted to ask you, April, and me, and you, our listeners, a question about intimacy in another way. And I'm going to take a cue from theologian, Henry Nouwen, who I was just reading up on his short little essays on intimacy. And I'm inviting you, even as April and I are doing this right now, to reflect on your marriage for a moment and ask yourself these two simple questions. They are simple but profound. Is it safe to love? Number one. And number two, is it safe to be loved? Now, Henry Nouwen asked the first question: is it safe to love? Is it safe to put myself out there, to make myself vulnerable and open to somebody else and to express my love to somebody? But April, you added the second question, which I thought was so incredibly important. Is it safe to be loved? Can you tell us why?
Mm-hmm. I think a big part of love that we don't consider is that when a person is putting themselves out there, like you have said, and loving another, if that love can't be received, if there's a block there, and that love just falls flat and isn't received, the circle of love between those two people gets blocked. It can't, there's something missing. And early on in our relationship, there was something that happened that kind of caused that. And it was, we had gone to a concert and I had experienced joy and really enjoyed your playing. And I thought it was beautiful. And I remember sitting in the car together afterwards and I expressed that to you. I said, that was just amazing. I really enjoyed your playing. It was beautiful. And the way you responded was something like, oh yeah, no, it's nothing. Don't know. And to me, like after I had shared my feelings, my affirmation of you, for you to respond like that felt like it just cut off everything I had just said. That in you seemingly not being able to receive my affirmation, it made my words feel not valued. And in you not receiving my love, I didn't feel loved.
And so that intimacy was broken. At that moment, I wasn't able to receive what you were vulnerable in sharing.
And thankfully, we were able to process that afterward. And you realized in not being able to see and accept yourself the way that I see you and the way that I express my love for you can break that intimacy.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up with me at the time or shortly after, because it then highlighted for me a whole area of brokenness in my life that I had never addressed. And that was in the area of self-confidence, self-worth, and all these things. For those of you who don't know, I've been a concert musician, classically trained violinist for going over 4 decades now. Gives you a hint how old I am. And I think I just got conditioned to hear people after concerts that the words they say didn't mean anything because I knew best how many mistakes I'd made. I knew best how much I screwed up, and people were just trying to quote unquote be nice. And I did that to you without realizing that. And so there was some brokenness that needed healing within me to be able to actually receive something from a person I love. And because if I didn't find healing for that, then I wouldn't be able to love you as well as you deserve to be loved and want to be loved. And so that's just one small example. I mean, things were going well in our relationship at the time, but that one thing broke intimacy for us and affected other areas. And again, I'm just so grateful that you brought that up quickly, that you gave me the opportunity for some reflection and some time to discover where I needed God's healing.
And I'm just thinking too, as we're talking, we just talked about drift and differences in a recent episode, and we can so easily fall out of intimacy when we're not being intentional about the different parts of intimacy. Are we having conversations? Are we connecting over what's going on in our hearts? Having those heart conversations. Are we doing things together that we enjoy doing? There's so many more things to intimacy than sex.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it can happen sometimes. And we've heard stories where couples, after they have sex, don't feel more connected. They don't feel that that's an intimacy that draws them together. It might even push them apart.
Right.
And that's because it's not the only piece. It's not the only way to connect. And it's important to remember also, and we'll talk about this in future episodes, but the love languages, that we are all made differently. And the thing that I feel loved by when you do that thing might not be the way that you feel loved if I do that thing. And so we need to have conversations. We need to, no matter how long we've been married, we need to continue to get to know each other, to listen, to understand each other. And even if it doesn't make sense to us, do the things that our spouse tells us makes them feel loved. Even if we're like, if you did that for me, it wouldn't matter. But.
Right. It's so true. And so our listeners, we really want to encourage you with today's episode. There is so much depth here that we will take time exploring in the coming weeks of the podcast. But ask yourselves those two simple questions. Is it safe to love? Is it safe to be loved in our marriage? And then we'd encourage you, have those conversations. What does intimacy mean to you? How do you experience intimacy? But also pay attention. Are there any blocks to intimacy in your marriage right now? Is there anything that's preventing you from loving your spouse or receiving that love, which is just as equally important? And again, if you do discover some blocks, maybe head back to episode 13, where we encourage you to find your trusted community, people that you can start to explore this together with outside of your marriage, especially. Also seek out wisdom and counsel from people like a pastor or a counselor. Reach out to us, please. We're here for you. We'd love to chat, and we'd love to pray with you through these things. You can get a hold of us. The easiest way is info@livingmarriages.com. And so, again, we want to thank you for being with us on this journey as we together discover what the fullness of what God has for us in our marriages, and what true intimacy can look like in and through Christ. And so until the next time, God bless.
Thank you so much for the privilege of journeying together with you.
Before you go, if you've been blessed, inspired, or challenged by what you've heard today, please bless us by subscribing and leaving us a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Share this podcast with your friends and come visit us at our website, livingmarriages.com.
Until next time, praying the light and life of God's love over you and your marriage.